Hello and welcome to today's video where we are going to talk about secure versus insecure attachment and really how your childhood shapes your adult romantic relationship. So, what we're going to really dive into here are some of the impacts of being securely attached versus insecurely attached. And then we'll go into the different attachment styles, especially for those of you who might be a little bit newer to the concept of attachment theory. And we'll talk about some of the nuances from a deeper perspective using tools from integrated attachment theory in the process. If you are new here and you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell because I put out daily content on the subconscious mind, attachment styles, and how to thrive in relationships as quickly as possible. So, first and foremost, secure attachment style tends to be associated with longer lasting and more thriving relationships. With the divorce rate in the United States clocking in at around over 50%, what we actually find is that with securely attached relationships, getting divorced is much less likely. Now, the secure attachment relationship, if you're not already familiar, is one of four major attachment styles. So, we have one secure attachment style called secure, and we have three insecure attachment styles called fearful avoidant attachment style. Sometimes you'll hear the term or it being referred to as disorganized attachment style. Then we have anxious attachment or anxious preoccupied attachment. Again, same thing. And dismissive avoidant attachment style. And you can imagine if they were sort of on opposite ends of the continuum, the anxious preoccupied attachment style, how their childhood essentially tends to affect their adult romantic relationships is that as an anxious preoccupied, they usually grow up in a household where there's either a real abandonment, like somebody really leaving, maybe a painful divorce, they don't really see one of their parents much anymore, or a perceived abandonment that happens frequently. So maybe there's a very warm parent and a very cold parent. And that juxtaposition of being with one parent who's emotionally available and then that being taken away when they're with the other parent can create this kind of perceived abandonment from one parent to the other. Or you may see something like, both parents are really emotionally available, but they both work a lot and they're not very like physically available. And so it can create this constant feeling of being abandoned. Now, of course, as an adult, this person then tends to be more clingy in relationships because they are constantly fearing abandonment, yet they have a lot of positive emotional associations subconsciously stored in regards to what they think love is. So they will be the more clingy person in a relationship. On the sort of opposing end of the attachment style continuum, in a way, we have a dismissive avoidant, and they tend to have a lot of neglect in childhood. And so as a result of this, they learn it doesn't feel good to try to build or foster deep emotional connection. And so I will just create space instead because at least it gives me some kind of control and relief. And they often feel like they are shameful for having emotional needs when they constantly have their emotional needs met with rejection in their upbringing. And then we have our fearful avoidant, which is the last of the three insecure attachment styles, right? So we've got the three insecure and the one secure. And the fearful avoidant, AKA disorganized attachment style, tends to essentially have both ends of the continuum. They can be really anxious and fear abandonment, or they can be really avoidant and need a lot of space. And this is really marked because in childhood, they would have had a lot of different walking on eggshells experiences, trust wounds, maybe broken promises or betrayals. Maybe they saw a really tough divorce or a really bad breakup. Or maybe there was just a lot of chaos in the home, or parents struggled with a substance or alcohol. And so either way, there was a lot of like this roller coaster dynamic. And so the fearful avoidant has competing stored associations about the same thing. So the same thing being love or relationships, and the competing associations being sometimes they're really good and sometimes they feel safe and I really connect. And other times they feel really threatening and unsafe and scary. And so I have this need to want to cling on and get close. But then when people get too close, I have this need to really push them away. And so here's what I want you to take away so far. And then we'll talk about some of the deeper wounds and fears and actually how to move the needle to create more of a secure attachment in your life. And the key takeaway so far is that whatever you are exposed to in childhood essentially becomes your subconscious set of rules that you learn about love and relating to other people. If you learn a lot of secure patterns of behaviors, numerous studies show that in securely attached relationships, Secure individuals tend to have a greater chance of feeling like they can trust people, they can communicate about their needs, they can give and receive emotional support, and they tend to have healthy interdependence, the ability to rely on themselves and rely on others in healthy and safe ways. Securely attached relationships tend to last the longest. Insecurely attached relationships, their rules about love are a little bit more confusing. So if you grew up in an anxiously attached environment, right, or you become anxiously attached from your environment, you had a lot more abandonment. And so you may cling, you really fear abandonment. Fearful avoidance, you had a lot of chaos. So you want love and you fear it. Dismissive avoidance, you had a lot of neglect. So you say, okay, I'm not even going to bother. I just want distance because then I feel like I have some kind of control and relief. So I'm not constantly yearning for something and then getting neglected or rejected. So you have these insecure styles. Now, a lot of insecure attachment styles end up in relationships with each other. And because our attachment experiences in childhood program our subconscious mind, and because our subconscious mind stores everything, okay, it stores all information and it can consolidate memories over time a little bit, but it essentially stores all of your memories. Then what you learn is rules and memories about how love is supposed to work. And these are essentially your rules that you bring into your adult life because your subconscious that information doesn't go anywhere. It's with you. So as soon as it gets imprinted or programmed into your subconscious, you carry it with you throughout the course of your life until you learn tools for how to reprogram this. Now, the analogy I often give here is that having a different attachment style than somebody else is like sitting down to play a board game with somebody and you have two separate rule books for how to play that board game. So, for example, one person has the rules for Scrabble, the other person has the rules for Monopoly, and you sit down and you try to play the board game. Of course, there's going to be unnecessary friction and confusion and heartache because you are trying to do this game of love with totally different rules and expectations about what it's supposed to look like and how you're supposed to be operating and how the other person's supposed to be showing up. And so it just causes all of this unnecessary confusion. Now, how do we actually take this like 50% plus statistic of marriages ending in divorce? And, of course, that doesn't even take into consideration all the different breakups that happen, right? All the different chaos and endings of relationships that might be meaningful to us, even prior to getting married. How do we take that and how do we move the needle into creating more securely attached relationships so that we can thrive, so that relationships can last, so that we can feel comfortable and healthy and safe in our relationships instead of like we're constantly walking on eggshells? Well, what we found, according to Gibson Integrated Attachment Theory, the body of work that we published and copyrighted in 2019, is that there are 6 main features that you need to work on. Feature number 1 is you have to learn to reprogram these old fears and wounds. Now, the subconscious mind is programmed through repetition plus emotion. So if you get repeatedly exposed to this idea of abandonment, you are going to be imprinted at the subconscious level with this concept or idea of abandonment, right? It happens repeatedly and it elicits an emotional response. So repetition and emotion conditions or programs this into you. We have to leverage repetition and emotion to see, feel, and create the opposite of that in our life. Now we have a tool called autosuggestion belief reprogramming, and it's the idea of seeing the opposite of these things and why they're possible and why you're worthy of the opposite, and also how to stop doing these things to yourself, like self-abandoning. And if we can consistently feed into the opposite of connection rather than abandonment, we can leverage core tools and principles, reprogram the subconscious mind. And in this copyrighted body of work, we've seen a tremendous amount of success at doing this. So autosuggestion or belief reprogramming is a huge first thing that we want to be able to do on these old stories or narratives that we have been carrying in our subconscious mind the whole time. So whether it's this idea that I'm shameful or weak or defective if I have emotional needs for the dismissive avoidant, or I'll be unsafe if I open up or I'm vulnerable. If it's the fearful avoidant who, constantly thinks that they're going to be betrayed or cheated on or abandoned, right? So they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. If you are the anxious preoccupied who's terribly fearing abandonment and a lack of safety, if you don't have that proximity and connection in your relationship, we have to recondition these old narratives about relationships so that we are not living, to use this old Wayne Dyer quote, right? We're not trying to drive our car by only looking in the rearview mirror, right? Like we can't just because something happens in the past, it doesn't mean that it's going to be, nor has to be our future. And so, what we want to be able to recognize is the past doesn't have to define your future. The subconscious feels like it does. But when we recondition these ideas, we actually create a new subconscious comfort zone of what we want to expect and what we tend to then invest in. And it allows us to not be carrying the baggage of these old core wounds or beliefs into our future relationships. So, that's a huge first part. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of other things in too much detail, but at a high level, as we go through the six, we've got reprogramming core wounds. We have to learn what our needs are. Okay. And we have to learn to communicate about our needs. Two and three here go hand in hand because if we don't know our needs, we can't communicate them to each other. And it's like if we imagine this rule book analogy, what I talked about in the board game, if you have a different set of rules and you can't even communicate about what your rules are and what the other person's are and find a way to compromise and make it work, then you're just left in a state of learned helplessness. So we have to learn what our rules are or needs are and what somebody else's are. And we have to learn to communicate about those things. And this is where we can make healthy compromises. This is where we can understand things through a different lens. So if you, for example, expect as an anxious preoccupied to see your partner 6 nights a week and you're dating a dismissive avoidant who expects to see their partner 1 night a week, if you don't even know that you have different rules or different needs, right? How can you make a compromise, right? And what's going to happen is when you don't know that you have different rules is you just personalize things instead. You just take everything personally that your partner's doing. Oh, they don't love me because they don't want to spend enough time with me, or they want to control me. That's why they want to spend so much time with me. We give it meaning based on those old wounds and pieces of baggage, right? So we have to be able to instead have a conversation and we have to be able to say, okay, like these are my needs. What are your needs? Okay, it's not about you that I have these needs. These are my pre-programmed needs that I'm bringing into the relationship. Those are your pre-programmed needs. Okay, how can we find a middle ground? How can we make sure that we're clear on these things and make compromises in order to make this work? And you'd be so surprised at how effective this is as soon as we just have context for what's going on, as soon as we just realize that we have a different attachment style, we have different programmed needs. It's not personal. Let's meet in the middle. Like it gets so much easier. So we have reprogramming core wounds, learning our needs, learning to communicate our needs, learning to self-soothe or emotionally regulate. This is done through, learning to understand our needs and meet them, learning to question these stories of baggage we have coming up in real time. So if I'm telling the story, I'm for sure going to be abandoned because my partner didn't call me back and I'm an anxious preoccupied and I now know that this is a wound for me. I can question it in real time. Like, hey, my partner didn't call me back. Could it be something other than me about to be abandoned, right? Could I have to like poke a hole in this old story I keep telling myself? Could it be something other than this? Well, the relationship's been really great lately. We have a plan to go on this trip in 2 months. So my partner's obviously, interested in being here. And I feel like in the relationship, there's a lot of ways my partner shows up to make an effort, and they might just be forgetful sometimes, or they might be stuck at work late. So could it be something other than this? We can try to like question and poke holes in these stories. And then we can also try to learn to meet our needs. Like, what else do I need from this person? Do I need to tell them that calling back is really important to me? It may not be a big deal for you with your subconscious rules and your beliefs, but for me in my programming, it's a big deal, right? So that would just be an example, right, of how we can regulate, because by poking a hole in this assumption that we're projecting onto things because it's stored in our subconscious, it's what we're used to from the past. So we project it onto our future. When we poke a hole in it, it stops that experience. And then when we learn to understand what our needs are and address them, communicate about them, it also helps us emotionally regulate. So far we've got our core wounds or stories. We've got our needs, we've got emotional regulation, we've got communicating about our needs, right? And then we have to learn healthy boundaries and we have to learn healthier behaviors. Sometimes in relationships, people will do things like stonewall, ice people out, call too many times because these are these old behavioral coping mechanisms. But when we learn to recondition these things as well, which I won't go into in this video too much right now because we've got lots of other videos on this channel that talk about these things. But when we learn to recondition our behaviors and we learn to have a healthier relationship to boundaries, these are things that move the final parts of the needle to building securely attached relationships. So I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. In other words, you can be trained to become a relationship coach certified in integrated attachment theory in literally 60 days. So who is this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the Integrated Attachment Theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives, so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. Now, please keep in mind that the last 2 times we ran this program, we filled up very fast. In fact, we oversold the programs and sold out completely. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me. And I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out. Now, research shows from polling surveys, a whole bunch of different information we've collected from inside the personal development school that if we can nail down those 6 major things, people over 92% of people, students within our school, reported becoming dominantly securely attached within 90 days if they worked very hard. It was about 3 hours a week for 90 days on those 6 major components. And I'm not sitting here saying like, hey, that means you have to do this right now. I'm sitting here saying, if you have grown up in a tumultuous environment, if you have been through hardships in relationships, and if you just think it's not possible, it is very possible to become securely attached and build thriving relationships. It does require some work and some investment of your time and energy, but it's going to allow you to do healthy relationships and also heal and put that past baggage or any challenges you're struggling with behind. So I just want to give you that hope, let you know it's fully possible. And of course, everybody's journey can be slightly different, right? We may have people who come in with a severe amount of attachment trauma. And of course, that 90-day journey might look a little bit different from them. And we might have people who, we've had people many times who are like, I've got some secure attachment already. I just want to get rid of any little bit of anxious, preoccupied attachment patterns I have. In 30 days, they saw a big improvement, right? So that is not always a linear journey, but it's so possible to shift these things. You are not born with these patterns. So you don't have to just keep going through these dynamics over and over again. They got conditioned into you and you can recondition them as well. So I hope this makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're enjoying this channel and this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And if you hit the notification bell, you won't miss any of our daily videos about attachment theory, well, really integrated attachment theory, the subconscious mind, and relationships. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.